Mic check. Can you hear me? Okay, awesome. Yeah, thank you, Tayo. I think we can start. So before we'll go on with today's topic, right? Um, a quick update. I've uploaded the videos for the last two sections on the YouTube channel. So I didn't share it, but I will do that on the group later today. But the videos are now on the YouTube channel. So last section we went through um, basic SQL commands: select stop, where clause, in, like, etc. So today we'll go a bit further, right? We'll go through joins in SQL. But then before we look at joins, we need to understand a simple concept in SQL that involves joining tables, right? So that's the primary key and the foreign key. So once you understand what these keys are and how they work, that will help you in understanding how joins work in SQL. So first, let's look at primary keys, right? So what is a primary key? So a primary key is simply a column where each entry uniquely represents a single row in that table. It's a column where each entry uniquely represents a single row in that table. So you have a table with different columns, but then you have one column that acts as a primary key, right? That column, its function is to uniquely represent every single row in that table. So it's usually the ID column, right? So you can have a table for customers. You have one column that's called customer ID. That column is simply just what serve as a primary key. It uniquely identifies every row or every customer in that table, right? And then an important point to note is that primary keys, they are always unique. And also the primary key column, it can't be empty. It must always hold values, right? The primary key is used to uniquely identify every row. So you can't have duplicates of the primary key. It must always be unique. And also it can't be null, it can't be empty. The column must always have values for each row. Since its function is to identify every row, you can't have it empty. It must always hold values that are unique, right? So if you look at the bottom here, you see a sample table, right? This is just 2 rows, but then it could be 10 rows, 100 rows, million rows. The same concept still applies, right? Every row, if you look at the first column, right, the ID column, that's a primary key. And its function is to what? Uniquely identify every row. So this is a user table, right? So for every user, he or she has a unique ID. That ID is unique to that user. So wherever you see ID1, it refers to the person with the name Sally Select with the address 123 join the arrow. You can't have a duplicate. You can't have another one on this column, on the ID column. One appears just once, right? Since the primary key, it appears just once. You can't have duplicates. Same thing with 2 too. 2 refers to what the user Frank from with the address 25 Weir Street. You can't have another 2 on this column. 2 appears just once, it's unique, right? So if you have more columns, 3, 4, 5, 6, etc., they all follow what? That same rule. You can't have duplicates, right? And they are unique. So this is an example of what the primary key column, right? The ID column is unique and it represents every single row in the table. Uniquely represents every single row in this table. So now the primary key, right, is unique, right? And identify every row. Let's look at the foreign key, right? And how that relates to the primary key. So for foreign keys, right, is simply a column in a table that establishes an association with another table's primary key, right? So you have a column in a table, and then this column is associated with what? A different table, right? The primary key of that different table. And these two columns are similar, right? They have shared or similar values. So for example, right, you have on this table, you have an event table. Note that for the primary key, right, you had the ID, the user ID, 1, 2, right? This is the primary key for this table. Now on the foreign key table now, you also have what? A column for user ID also. 1, 3, 4, right? Then you have what? An event ID. This ID here now is the event ID, right? This is the primary key for this table, event ID. Then you have the action column, login, view page, login. So here, right, the user ID column, the very first column here, user ID, it exists in the user table as a primary key, right? So on the user table, the user ID 1, 2 is a primary key. But this column also exists on the event table, right? User ID 1, 3, 4. So here now, it exists as a foreign key. And for the foreign key, right, you can have duplicates, right? So it can be null also. Since this is not the primary key. But for the event table has its own primary key, which is what's the second column, the ID column, ABC, right? But the user ID here is a foreign key because it exists in the user table as a primary key. So the foreign key is simply a column, right, in a table that exists in a different table as a primary key. So how does the primary key and foreign key relate? When I'm trying to join or combine data, right, from the user table and the events table, right, the way I can link them is through a similar column, user ID and user ID, right? So the primary key and foreign key relationship, that connection, that's what I will leverage to join these tables together. So in summary, a primary key is what's a column, right, that's unique and non-null, and it uniquely represents every row in the table. The foreign key is simply a column in a table that exists as a primary key in a different table. And you can link these tables, right, using the primary key and foreign key connections. So let's build on this, right? So the foreign keys, they are typically ID columns also, right? But then they are prefixed or prepended with the name of the reference table. So you saw the example here, right? User ID. So user ID is showing us that what this column is from the users table, right? Is the ID of the users table. So it means that what I can link the user table with this column, right? User ID to the ID on the user table. So this image is just showing us, right, what I just explained. You have the user table, right, with the ID, right? User ID primary column. And this arrow is showing you how you can connect these tables together, right? The ID column here linked to what? The user ID on the events table. So in the user table, ID, right? User ID is the primary key. This column also exists in the event table, user ID, right? So I can link this primary key here to what is similar column in the event table, primary key to foreign key. The event table has its own primary key, which is not important, right? When we are trying to leverage our connections, it's just different. Events table, right? The ID ABC, that's just the primary key. But this user ID, it exists in the user table as a primary key. So we can leverage this, right, to link them together, which we'll see subsequently. So now let's look at SQL joins, right? Let's build on our primary key, foreign key understanding, and let's look at SQL joins. So what's a join? A join clause is used to combine rows from two or more tables based on a related column between them. So this related column, right, stems from what we just went through now, the primary key and foreign key relationships, right? So you can use these relationships to what join tables together, primary key to foreign key. So an example of this, right? Let's say you work in an organization, right? You have a CRM, a customer relationship management tool like Salesforce, right? So it contains users, so people who use your software, for example, right? So it tracks their data, right? Then you also have um, another tool, so a product analytics tool like Mixpanel. This has data for events, right? So it tracks the events that these users carry out on your platform. So you have two different data, right? The first data is from your CRM, Salesforce. That's simply data for your users. So all your users, it has their data there. But these users, they carry out different operations, right? Different activities on your software or platform. You want to track this, right? So Mixpanel helps you track this data. So I want to know if customer A bought something, right? Mixpanel will show me that data. So you have two different tables. The first table in Salesforce is showing your users, right? Not their actions, just your users and their details. It could be their names, their location, gender, etc. Right? But now your second table, table 2 from Mixpanel, this tracks all the actions that your users do. So maybe user A bought this, user B click this button, that kind of thing, right? So it tracks all those activities. So you have two different tables. The user table, which just has your user data, their name and characteristics, their location, gender, etc. Then your events table, which has all the actions that the users, right, carry out on your platform. So this is just showing you a sample, right? The first table, user table, is showing you the ID. That's a primary key, right? Every user has a unique ID. Then you have the name of the user and their address. You could have other data like gender, location, etc. Right? So this is just the first table from your CRM, your Salesforce data, right? Then you have the second table, the events table. This is now showing you what each user is doing on your platform. So for example, one, right, is showing you what login. User 3 viewed a page. User 4 logged in, right? So this is just a small subset, but you could have thousands and millions of rows, right? So for the user table, right, every user, let's say I have 10 customers, so I'll have only 10 rows in the user table. Every row is for one customer, right? But the events table, for example, one user can carry out multiple actions. User one, for example, can log in. User 2 can log in and view a page, right? So every row is showing you an event, an action. So you can have multiple rows for a user. Since user ID 1 can carry out multiple actions, right? So here, this is just showing you user data and event data. And how do we link this together, right? Through the primary key and foreign key connection, user ID to user ID, right? So you have different kinds of joins, right? So let's look at the first kind of join. So this is the most common join that you carry out, right, when working with SQL. So inner join. So the inner join, right, this is used to return records that have matching values in both tables. So you have two different tables. You want to return the values, right, that match in these two tables. You use the inner join for this. It returns matching values from both tables. So let's see a scenario, right, using our current example. So you want to have a table that contains only users that have done an action. You want to have a table that contains only users that can have done an action, right? So back to our chart, right? So you have, okay, let me just go to the next thing here. So for the inner join, right, this is a syntax. Select, you choose the columns you want to return. So maybe you want to return all the columns, that'll be select star. You want to return some columns, we just put the column right. From table 1, return user ID, return user address. From table 2, return the action that was carried out, for example. So then you now add what? A from clause, right? So from table 1, how do I want to join table 2? Use an inner join, right? From table 1, inner join table 2. So it could be from users, inner join events, right? On now, what's the similar column between them, right? User ID, user ID. So you say users.id equal to events.user ID, the similar column between them, right? You use that. So we'll see an example in a bit. So this chart is just showing you what happens with the inner join, right? So for example, this table 1, it has 2 rows, right? And you have the similar column, right? The primary key here is what? The first column, 1 and 2. Those are the IDs you have there. For table 2, right? So for table 1, you have what? These 2 values, right? 1 and 2. Table 2, you have what? 3 rows, 1, 3, 4. What inner join does is that it returns the matching values, right? So if you look at the IDs, only thing that match is what? 1. There is 1 in the first table and 1 in the second table, right? So primary key, foreign key. You have only 1 that match between 2 of them. So inner join will return only data, right, for that matching row. So you look at the resulting table, right, at the right-hand side. So this is just showing you what's just 1 row for table 1, the one that has the match, right? So inner join returns just the matching rows from both tables, which is 1 here. So at this point, let me share my full screen. I'll head over to SQL Server Management Studio. So what I can do is I'll just do a dummy table, right? So I'll make a database and 2 dummy tables. So database, I'll call this so I'll create 2 sample tables, users and events, and we'll use this to just demonstrate what we just explained, right? So inner join. So I'll call this let me just call this store DB, right? Store DB. Okay. So this is my store DB, right? Currently, there are no tables here. So I'll make tables. So I'll just do a right click. I'll open this up rather. I'll come onto tables and make new tables. So I could use a query. I could use the interface, right? Either of those work. So let's start with the user table. So you have 3 columns, right? The ID column, name and address. So let's try to create this. So I'll call this ID, right? And the ID, they are numbers, right? So I'll make this so data type, right? What data type do you want to have for this? They are numbers. So we just use int, right? 1, 2, those are whole numbers. So we can use int for that. So I'll use the int type, int data type, right? For integers. Allow nulls, no. Since it's a primary key, right? It shouldn't have null values. So I'll check the null. And then the next column I want to create is the name, right? The name. So I'll come on here and I'll call this name. And for this, right, this is just text. So we can use I can use text type or varchar. Either of those work. I'll use text. allow null, no, I don't want to have null values there. And lastly, you have address, right? And for this will varchar. You can have numbers and text together. So I'll just put varchar, and 50 just showing the number of characters that should be there. Allow nulls. Let's just have this. No. So this is my table, right? So what I can do is I can save this save table, right? What's the name of the table? I'll call it users table. Users table, and hit OK. So currently this is empty, right? Once I refresh this, it should have my table created. But then our table is currently empty. There are no values here. So we're going to add values into the table. I think I have a lot of stuff open. So this is just stuff. I think it is open, right? It's my table, DBO users. So what I can do is if I click on design, right, you see that currently edit top 200 rows. I want to add data into this. Currently, these are all empty, right? So I'll put ID1, ID1, and the name for this, right? So let's use the same data we have here. Sally select, right? So I'll put that same name here. Sally select. And for the address, right? 123 join there. Right, then you have ID2. And for this, we'll call this Frank from 25 West Street. I could add more rows, so I just happen to open. I'll call this Susan about, just random names, and we'll call this 44 about Boulevard. And I'll add one more, so I'll just have 4 rows. I'll call this Paul, just random name, Paul Yereva, and I'll call this that's a 5. Wherever close. So I have 4 rows, right? And what I can do is I can save this. So just close this, right? This is updated. So now you can make this ID the primary key as primary key, right? The ID, make it the primary key. And now when I try to look at the values, top 1000 rows, so you can see the results, right? We have those 4 rows. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, right? The names that I'll put there. So that's the users table. So now let's try to create the let's create the events table with a query. Create table events. So for the events table, let me see. We have 3 columns also: user ID, and action. Int, right? Say not null, for example. And then I have the ID column. So this should be int also. Should make it the primary key. It should not be null also. And then lastly, you have what column now? You have the action column. So this is I think that's text, right? So we can make it text. And you can see not null also. So we are saying create a table called events, right? Make a table called events, and then make a column called user ID with int type, and it should not be empty. Then make another column called ID, that's the event ID, right? Integer, then make it the primary key. It should not be empty also. And then lastly, a column called action, text type, right? It should not be empty. So now we could just insert into this table, right? So insert into the events table, right? The following values. So for the first row, right? For the first row, you put the IDs you want to put here, right? So I could just play around, just put random values. I could say 1, for example, and then let's see how the ID was structured here. So, okay, the ID here is text, not, so if you look here, right, let me annotate. If you look here, you see that what the ID here is ABC, is text, not integer. So I need to correct that now. So let's go back to this. So I need to correct this. The ID is the ID here is ABC. That's text, not integer. Let me fix that. So let me see this A, event A, and the action for this. Just choose an action. So this is login view page login. So I need to put this in put it in quotes, right? So the text. So I put it in quotes A, and the action in text also, right? This is login. So this is the first row, right? So what we're saying is for the user ID 1, for the ID, right? That's A, and for the action for the first row, right? That should be what login. That's what you're saying in essence. So I put a comma, right? Second row, what should be here? I could put ID 2, right? And then for this would be B, for example. And here, I think transaction was view contents. Let me see what I had there again. View page login, okay. Let me put 2 again and event C. So every event should be unique, right? So ABC like that. And let's say user2 login, right? And then user3 login. And I'll add one last row. User3 again. So I think this should be enough to explain all the kinds of joins. User3 event E and view page. Cool. So what I'm doing in Xsense, right? Let me zoom in. So we are creating a table called events table with 3 columns, like I explained. In this table, we'll have 5 columns, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? So you have for the ID, you have 5 user IDs, 1, 2, 2, 3, 3. For the event ID, you have what? A, B, C, D, E. Remember, it's a primary key, right? So it has to be what's unique. And it can be empty also. For the action, you have what? Login, view page, login, view page. So once I have this right, I can run this query. So let's execute this and see the results. So let me see what the error is. Column ID in table events. So I type an invalid for the key column in an index. Okay. Let me make this. Make it VACA. I should work. Let me see. Let's see this work. Yeah, cool. So you can use a text type to create a primary key column, right? So I change this to nVACA, and then you have just one value. So A, B, C, D, E down to Z. Though it would be best to have this possibly like 5. One won't serve, right? But for our demo, this should work. So I have this, right? So let's look at let's come to our tables. Currently, it's not showing. Once I refresh this, you should see my events table, right? So we could just do a simple select statement. So I would say select star from events, right? So once I run this query now, you see the table we created, right? Execute this. So this is my events table, right? 1 to 5, A, B, C, D, E, login view page down to this, right? Awesome. So I have my 2 tables. One last thing is to create, so you check the events table, right? You see the keys, you see that the event ID, right? The ID column is the primary key, right? And if you check the users table, you see that the I thought it made it the primary key. Okay, I didn't save it yet. I didn't save it yet. I'll come here and save it. Right click and save. So once I refresh this now, it should update. Yeah, cool. So these are the primary key, right? For these are stable primary key. So one last thing before one occurs, we need to create the connections, right? Primary key to foreign key connections. I could use a query. I could also use the interface. So I'll come to the foreign key column, right? And from our image, right? What's the foreign key? The user ID column on the events table. That's a foreign key. So that's where I'll come to, right? Events table, user ID. Events table, user ID. This is my foreign key. So I'll come here, right click and modify this. So I'll come onto user ID, right click, and come to relationships, right? And I'll add a relationship. So add a relationship here. And I'll come on to where I have tables and column specifications, right? I'll come to the right-hand side, the ellipse is here, click on this. And here I can put my connections, right? My primary key table is the users table, and the ID column is the primary key. Events, user ID, right? User ID is a foreign key. So once I have this, right, I can hit OK. And I can close this. And then I can save this, right? Yes, continue. So once you have this, right, when I come on here and refresh this, you should see my connections created. So columns, you have this now, right? User ID foreign key in the events table, correct? So we can run our queries now. So let's start with the inner join, right? What I'll do is I'll just I'll have two editors. This showing me the user table, right? Next time from users. So I execute this. And this is my users table. So this is users table. This is the events table, right? These events, these users. So let's do the inner join. So remember that inner join, right? What it does is that it returns the matching rows. So you have 1 to 4 here, right? And on here, you have what? The only rows that here 1, 2, 3. So 1, 2, 3, they exist on this table, right? There's no 4 on this table. And here you see that what you have 1, 2, 3, 4. So you have 1 to 4. However, on the events table, just 1 to 3 exists. So it means that number 4 didn't carry out any action yet, right? And what's the goal of my query? We want to find out how many users, right, have carried out actions, like, and what are the actions they carried out. So we want to see the actions that the users here have carried out on the table, right? So we'll have to join these two tables together to find that information. And we'll use the inner join, since we want to just find out what the users here that have carried out actions in this table, right? So once you know what you're joining with, right? Primary key, which is the ID here, right? So foreign key, which is user ID here. Then that's the main thing you need, right? So we can run our query now. So I'll open a new editor. And here I'll run my query, right? So I'll say select. So let's do it 2 ways. Let's choose all the data. Select star from. So I'll work with the users table, but it could go anyway. Anyone can come first, right? From users, right? And then I would join the events table. Join events table. And here, right, you specify what columns are you joining on. So on, right, select all the data from both tables, right? Select star means choose all the columns. From the users table, join the events table. Now, how do I want to join the events table, right? The similar columns, right? Primary key to foreign key. So on the users table, right, the primary key is the ID column. So I'll say users and then a dot, right? A period, and then the ID column, right? So I'm saying users table dot ID column, right? So join events on the ID column in user table here is equal to the user ID column on the events table, right? So events dot user ID. Am I getting error? It's not called events. Next one, you can see what it gives us. Okay, I have a symbol here. So let's execute that's what it gives us. So these are result sets, right? So you can see it returns just the matching values. So you have what 1, 2, and 3, right? Note that you don't have any 4 here because users and events, the only common columns, right, is the user ID, and the matching rows are 1, 2, 3. So let's go back to the users table, right? You have 1, 2, 3, 4. When you go into the events table, you have what 1, 2, 2 times, 3, 2 times, right? So there's no 4 here, and that's why our final results, we don't have any 4 appearing here. It only returns the results for where they are matching, right? So what it does is that there's a 1 here. So there's a 1 here. There's a 1 here, right? And there's also a 1 here. They match, right? So it returns what this row. So user ID 1, ID is a action login, right? Name is Sally select address. It returns all that data. User ID 1, right? 1 select the address, right? User ID 1, ID is a action login. So 1, 2, 3 is basically your users table. 1, 2, 3 is basically your events table. It returns all the columns, right? Since I put what a star there, return all the columns. But I could choose what columns to return, right? So the next row, you have what 2, right? And for the ID, 2 is here, 2 is here, right? Multiple. So you have 2 multiple times, 2, 2. So what it does is that what it's they match, right? There's a 2 here, and you have what 2 multiple times, right? So it just returns their data. For the user ID 2, where the name is what Frank from, address is where he carried out what 2 actions, right? View page and login. And you have that data here, right? Frank from view page and what login. It returns all the data, right? For ID 2. The same drill also, right? It goes to the next guy, 3. So the matching data, right? ID 3 and what ID 3. You have it 2 times. So it returns all data for ID 3. He had 2 actions. He logged in and he viewed the page, right? It returns that here also, login and view page, right? For the next guy, which is what ID 4. So you see the primary key, foreign key, right? It looks for 4 here. There's no 4 in this table, right? So it returns nothing. So only those that match are returned, right? That's a catch with the inner join. So it's used to return matching rows from both tables. So you can see the example here, right? 1, 2, 1, 3, 4. Only 1 match in both tables, so it returns 1, right? The same thing we just saw now. So let's go to the next kind of join, right? The full join. So the full join is also called the full outer join, right? So they both mean the same thing. So the full join, it combines the columns from, okay, before I go into this, right, let me just show something. So currently I'm returning all the columns, right? But if, for example, I want to return just the ID from the users table and the action from the events table, right? I want just two columns, the ID here and the action here, right? So what I can do is I'll come on here, instead of star says return all the columns, right? I'll say what? So we could do two things now. So to make your query cleaner, right, you can use aliases. So instead of saying users.id, I'll just come and say from users. And this is useful when you have a lot of tables you're joining on, right? So from users, I'll give it an alias, you, right? This means that going forward, wherever you see you in my query, it represents what's the users table. Same thing here to write events. I'll put an E here. It means that what going forward, wherever you see an E in this query, it represents what's the events table. So instead of typing the long table name, right, just use aliases to make your query cleaner. So I'll say select what. So I want to return the ID column from the users table, right? So instead of saying users.id, right, I can just put what u.id, right? Since u now represents what the users table, so I'll put what u.id. I'm saying what select the ID column from the users table, and also instead of events.action, I will say what e.action, right? So I'm saying return the action column from the events table. So I expect to have just two columns in my result, right? The ID, and the action, right? So let's execute it and see what it gives us. So I come on to execute and I run this, execute this. What's the error? Okay, another thing. So users.id. So the same drill, right? We'll come on here. This will be you going forward, you. This will be E also. Yeah. So instead of events, right? You have E in place of it. Instead of users, you have E in place of it. So I think it should work now. Yeah, awesome. So here you see what we have just two rows, right? The ID and the action. But when you use star, it returns all the columns from both tables, right? So let's just point that out. So back to the next concept, right? The full join or outer join. It combines the columns from all tables, right? On the common dimension. In our case, that's user ID, right? On the common column between them. So it returns all the rows, right, from both tables. That's a full join. So inner join returns the matching rows. However, the full join, right, it returns all the rows. So let's see a use case. So given our example, right, users table and events table, let's say you want to return a table that contains all your user and event table together. So now I don't want to know if I don't want to see only those that have carried that event. I want to see everybody. So I will see everybody, right? But then I'll return all the rows for everybody. So I have user 1 to 4. I'll have 4 people in my final table, right? And I will see all their data in my final table. So this is the syntax, right? Choose your columns from table 1. So instead of inner join, you now have what? A full join, right? And then you have the matching columns. So you put that right. For example, user.id equal to events.user.id, right? So this is a pictorial representation. So you have what? Table 1, you have 2 IDs, 1, 2. Table 2, you have 3 IDs, 1, 3, 4, right? For the inner join, only one matches, right? You have one row returned. But here you have what? It returns all the possible IDs, right? So 1 is here, you have a row for 1. 2 is here, you have a row for 2. 3 is here, you have a row for 3. And you also have 4, you have a row for 4, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, it returns all the data, right? So it combines based on the common field, right? And returns all the data from both tables. So let's get an example for our use case, right? We want to return all the data in both tables. So what I can do is I come on here and let's just use the same example as before. Select star from users, and I'll just use the alias, right? You, so it's cleaner. And then I'll say join events E on. So I want a full join, right? So I'll put again a full join. So I want a full join. So instead of join, so inner join and join the same thing, right? You can just keep the inner. Join means what? Inner join, they're the same thing. But for the full join, I have to put the full here, right? Do a full join, that's what I want to do. So from user as you, do a full join on the events table using a similar column on. So I'll say user table dot ID, that's primary key, is equal to events table dot user ID, that's a foreign key. So once I have this, I can execute this query and see my results. So you can see our results, right? Unlike the inner join, where we just had what the matching guys 1, 2, 2, 3, 3. But now he has also added what the row, right, that did not match in both tables. So the user ID 4, you have this data, right? So you can see that this is the ID, right? 1 to 4. And this is the name, right? Paul whenever. This is address, right? However, this user ID 4, these three rows, these three columns, right? They are from the users table, right? 1, 2, 3. And you know it stopped at 4, right? 1 to 4. However, in the events table, user ID 4 does not exist, right? So what happens? You have what? A null there, right? There's no data for him in the events table, so he's null. There's no ID also, that's null. No action, that's null, right? So you see that it returns all the columns from both tables. So this is useful when you want to see all your data, right? And you want to know, okay, who hasn't carried an action? You can see easily. So I can see easily that these are all my users 1 till 4, right? 1 has carried out 1 action, 2 have carried out 2 actions, 3 2 actions. However, user 4 has not done any action at all, right? You just know here. So that's useful in that kind of scenario. So that's a full join, right? It returns all the rows from both tables. Now let's go on to the next one, right? The left join. So the left join. So let's say you have 2 tables, right? When you're writing your join statement, the first table will be your left table. And then there is second table, right? So let me go back to my XMS to explain what I mean to you. So for example, right, in this query we just finished writing now, right? Your left table will be the very first table, that's users. This will be your left table. And then the subsequent table, right, will be your right table. So in this instance, right, you treat the first as a left table, and this will be your right table. So take note of that, right? So back to the slide, right? So left join, it combines your columns, right, from both tables in the same dimension, primary key to foreign key. However, it returns all the rows from your left table. That's your first table, right? In our example I just showed you now, that's the users table. It returns all the rows from that table. However, it returns only the matching rows, right, from the next table. And note that you can have multiple joins. You can join 3, 4, 5 tables. So in that instance, your first table will be what's your left table. All the other tables, it will return only the matching values from those tables. So if you have 3 tables that you're joining on, for example, the very first table is your left table, and then the next 2 tables, right? The left join will return only matching values from those tables. Left join returns all the rows from the first table and only matching rows from what the consecutive table. So let's see a pictorial representation, right? So let's say, for example, we want to have a table that contains all the users' data, but then it shows us only actions that those users have done, right? So it means we want to see all the users, but then show us only actions that the users have carried out. So in this instance, right, actions performed by other users not in our table should not be included. So let's say, for example, you have a user 5, for example, right? Note that in our user table, we have just 1 to 4, right? If you have a user 5, then that user 5 will not be in our final query because in the left table, you have just 1 to 4. Left join returns all the rows there, right? And returns only the matching rows in the consecutive table. So it returns only data for 1 to 4. Any other row there, it won't return that data, right? That's left join. So let's see the syntax, right? The exact same thing. You just replace your join with what? A left join, right? So if you look at this image, right, you have 1, 2 ID, you have what? 1, 3, 4. Okay, this for left, this for left join. This for left join. This image is for left join, right? So ideally, what you should have just give me a second. Let me try to get the correct image. All right. Cool. So you can see my screen, right? This is showing you the left join. So here you have let me annotate. You have 1, 2, right? As the ID here. Left join will return all the rows from your left or first table, right? And return only the matching data, right? From your table. That's what's 1 here. So you see our final result, right? It returns all the rows from the left table, 1 and 2. But it returns only the matching values. So it searches for 1. Is there a 1 here? Yes, there's a 1. It returns the data for 1, right? Which is this. It searches for 2. Is there a 2 here? No, there's no 2. So you have what is blank, right? For that data. The rest are not relevant. Only those what that are matching, right? All the rows from the left table, 1, 2, and only matching rows from the right table, right? That's this. So that's how the left join works, right? So let's do an example in SSMS. So I come on here and I want to do a left join, right? This is our table. So back to our sample, right? This is the user table, 1 to 4, right? Left join will return what? 1, 2, 3, 4, right? And here, right, you have 1, 2, 2, 3, 3. So it returns all the rows in our left table, 1 to 4, but only the matching rows, right, here, which is what? 1, 2, 3. So you have only 3 rows that match. So we can come on here and do the left join. So left join, right? So let's start from user zero. I'll just replace the full with left. So I come on here and put a left there. Right. And when I execute this, so if you have a similar result with the full join, right? It should be similar results, yeah. Because in this instance, right, all the rows in our events table, they exist in the users table. So they have similar results. But if you had a case where you had, for example, ID 5 in the events table, ID 6, those IDs do not exist in the users table, right? So you have different results for your full and left join. But in this instance, they are the same thing because all the tables in the events table, all the rows there, they also exist in the all the IDs, right? They exist also in the user table. That's why you have the same results. But this is the left table, right? So you also have a right join. A right join is just what? A converse, right? So instead of the first table, right? You now have what's the second table. It returns all the rows from the second table and only the matching rows on the first table. So in this instance, right? Let's say these are user table, this is the first table, these events, second table. So it returns all the rows here, right? But only the matching rows in the users table. So in this instance, we'll have what? We'll have 5 rows, 1, 2, 2, 3, 3, and you won't have 4 present, right? So we won't have this row here. We'll have just 1, 2, 3. Let's try it and see. So I come on here and do a right join, and I execute this. And you can see, right, it returns all the rows from the right table. That's the events table, all the rows there, but only the matching rows, right, in the users table. So 1, 2, 3 are the matching rows, right? It does not return the fourth row. So that's the right join, just similar to the left join. You just change the orientation, right? Instead of the first table, the second table is your right table. And now let's look at union and cross join, right? So union is simply appending, right, or stacking tables on top of each other, resulting in new rows. So let's say you have 2 tables, right? Table 1 has 2 rows, table 2 has 3 rows. When you union this table, right, you're simply what? Putting one table on top the other one, and you have what? 2 plus 3 rows. That's what? 5 rows. So you have 1, 2, 1, 3, 4, right? So let's come on here and do an example. So if you look at our table, right, the users table has 4 rows and the events table has 5 rows. When we union this together, we expect to have what? 4 plus 5. That's 9 rows, right? So let's do this and see what it gives us. So simply we just do a slight edit, right? So let's start from users, and then union the result, right? Union events E. I think I need this. Let's see. ID, name, address, user ID. So this is used when both tables, right? They have the same column. So what I can do is user dot ID, select user, and so let's just do similar tables. Since they are the same columns, that should work in your users. So select start from users, senior, select start from users. So let me just explain what we're trying to do. So when I run this query, these are my results, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. When I run this query also, these are my results. 1, 2, 3, 4. So what I'm saying is combine this query, right, and this query together. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. That should have give me 8 rows, right? I think this should work. So when I run this, text cannot be used as an operand to be. What's the issue? It is working. But when I add the name column, it does not work. So union, right? It joins when you look at this when you look at this, right? So I think the issue here is that when I add a star or the name column, it returns an error. So for some reason, it looks like text data type does not work with the union function or something. That's what I'm saying from the errors. When I add the name I run this, it gives me an error, right? When I take it off, so that's a text type. When I take it off, it works correctly, right? That's interesting. I just noticed this now. So execute this, right? So possibly instead of a text type, we could use the varchar type, right? They are the same thing. It looks like varchar works. So text, it does not work with the union function. What I'm seeing in SQL Server. So here, right? I explained that you have 4 rows here, right? When you run this, you also have 4 rows here. When you run this, right? 4 rows each, right? So we expect to have what when you union this, you expect to have what 8 rows, right? 4 plus 4 stacked together. But the union function, right, it returns the distinct or unique or unique values, right, from your result set. So note that what these two tables, they're the exact same thing, right? So 4, 4. However, those 8 resultant rows, right? You find that what when you return the unique or distinct values here is 4 rows. One is appearing 2 times, right? With the same address, 1, 2, 3, join BR, right? So instead of 8 rows, it returns what 4 rows. Because what those 8 rows contain duplicates, right? And union returns what distinct or unique values. But then you have a slight variation when you add union all, right? So union all, now what it does is that it returns all irrespective of duplicates. So you see that what union all, right? Look at the result set. Instead of 4, you now have what 8 results, right? So 1, 1, right? These are first table, right? The very first query you run. This is the first table, this, right? This 4 here are the first table. These are second table, right? So when you do the union, it returns what's the unique, right, of these 8 values. So you see that what this occurs twice, right? So it returns a unique, only one is returned. Same thing here too. This occurs twice. Unique, only one is returned, right? Same thing with 3 and 4. But when you do the union all, right, it returns what everything, irrespective of duplicates, right? That's the union all function. If I do select ID and then I say select ID and what do we have action, for example, yeah, from events. Let's see what this is using. If it works. I could do just ID, ID, and both. No. Let's just try something. So ID from users, you know, the ID from events. This should work. The same type should work. It's called user ID, not ID, user ID. Yeah. Yeah. So you have this is my first table, right? From the events table, 1, 2, 3, 4. These are user tables, sorry. 1, 2, 3, 4. And these are events table, 1, 2, 2 twice, 3 twice, right? But if I do a union, right, then all duplicates will be removed. So I'll have just 1, 2, 3, 4. I expect. Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4. So this is union, right? You used to combine when you're trying to append 2 result sets, right? So this is useful when possibly you're trying to you have 2 or more different queries. You're trying to get their results and stack them together, right? So you could write a query to get your results from different queries and then union them together to get your final result set. That's when you're writing a bit of complex SQL. So let's look at cross join, right? So for the cross join, what cross join does is that it just returns a possible combination of all rows in the tables you have. So cross join, right? It results in a table with all possible combinations of your tables rows together. So an example, right? You have this table here, which is it has 2 rows, right? 1 and 2. You have table 2. It has 3 rows, 1, 3, 4. So what cross join does is that it's so the first one, right? 1 and 1, right? It returns that row of data. This. It does also, right? 1 and 3, right? It returns that row of data also. It does what? 1 and 4, right? it returns that row as well, right? So one has combined with all the different rows here, right? That's done. The next row now here, that's 2, right? 2 and 1, you have that here, right? And then 2 and 3, right? You have that here. And then 2 and 4, right? You have that here. So basically, it returns m times n rows. So in table 1, you have 2 rows. Table 2 has 3 rows, right? You have what? 2 times 3 rows. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 rows. That's a cross join. So it returns all possible combinations of your table rows together. So we can see an example in SSMS. So I come on here. And just the exact same thing, right? So I'll say ID from users, cross join. So note that, let's see, this contains 4, right? 1, 2, 3, 4 rows. And this contains 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rows, right? So let's execute this and see. So it says the correct syntax here, the key word. Select. So I think we need to take off this select. Please, the select ID from users, cross join, then this table, right? That's what we'll do. So select ID from users, cross join events table. So for every ID in the users table, right? Just do a possible combinations with every row in the events table. So this should work when I execute this. So these are result sets. Let me just do this star. That's what it gives me. Yeah, awesome. So this is easy to see what's happening. So let's go back to our table structure, right? This is the users table, 1, 2, 3, 4. And this is the events table, right? 1, 2 twice, 3 twice, right? So cross join, it takes the very first row, 1, right? This first row will carry out a possible combination with every row in the events table, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? So 1 and 1, right? So this one here and this one here, that's the very first row you're seeing, right? That's this. ID1, user ID1, right? The next one now is what's the same one again. We go to the next one, right? That's ID2. So you have what? You have ID1, user ID2, right? I know that what 2 appears twice, right? 2, 2. One is view page, one is login. So the exact same thing, right? You have what? 2 for view page, 1 and 2, right? For login. The next row, right? 1 and 3, 1 and 3. So once 1 is done going through the 5 rows in the events table, the next ID, right? Which ID2? The exact same thing too. The 5 rows, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The next one now, right? 3. The 5 rows, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Just like that, right? So like I said, you have what? If you have 4 rows here and you have 5 rows here, your resulting number of rows will be what? 4 times 5, right? That's 20 rows. When you look at our final results here, you have what's 20 rows, right? So that's how the cross join works. It returns a possible combination of both tables, right? So back to my slide. We've gone through the different types of joins, right? So what I want us to do next, right, is to use our knowledge of joins, right, and try to answer some business questions using our patch and posy database, right? But I think we'll do that tomorrow because time is fast spent. So at this point, I'll take any questions that you might have before I wrap up for today. So we've gone through primary keys, foreign keys, the different kinds of joins. Then we look at also unions and cross joins. So any questions that you might have from what we just did today, or done subsequently, you type in the chat or raise your hand and I'll attend to it. Yeah, so it looks like we understand what we just went through, right? Looks like understood everything. If that's the case, then I'm glad that we're able to understand all we went through, right? So at this point, I think we'll wrap up. So like I said, I've put up the videos, right, for the last 2 sections on the YouTube channel. I will share the link after I drop this call on the group, and then hopefully, yeah, you're welcome, Lee. Yeah. So hopefully, once I do edits on this video, I'll also put it up, right? So if there are no questions, I think we can wrap up. So thank you all, and I'll catch you guys tomorrow, 7:15 GMT. Have a great night rest. Catch you tomorrow. Yeah, you're welcome, Malik. Yeah, you're welcome, Gama. Good night.